A Kid's Book About Systemic Racism by Jordan Thierry. As a note, this is a better together book, which means this book is best read together with a grown up and a kid. A Kid's Book About Systemic Racism. This is the intro. I hope you take a moment to read it with your grown up. This is a book about systemic racism. And believe it or not, it's actually for kids like you. I have to say, this book was really hard to write. Systemic racism is incredibly difficult to understand, even for grown-ups. But to help make sense of it, I'm going to start with an example. I am Black. Did you know that it's really rare for someone with my skin color to write a kid's book? And when I was a kid, I almost never read a book by a Black author. That might seem normal or like no big deal, but it shouldn't be normal. And it is a big deal. But that's kind of how it works. Systemic racism seems normal, but it's not. It's almost like it's invisible, something that's always around you, but you never quite see it unless you look really, really hard. So, my hope with this kids' book is to help you not only see it, but to want to do something about it. You might already know what racism is, but if you don't, it's when someone is excluded, treated badly, or even hated because of their race or the color of their skin. Systemic racism is when racist ideas are built into laws, schools, stories, and other institutions in a way that makes it collectively much harder for people of color to live their lives. Let me give you some more examples to help you understand. When I was a kid, the only people on TV that looked like me were athletes, comedians, or rappers. And when I was in school, I was suspended for many things that my white friends often were not suspended for. When I was in class, I never had a teacher that looked like me, not until I went to college. And when I was a teenager, I was stopped by the police multiple times, while many of my white friends weren't. Looking at these moments, it may not seem like it was about the color of my skin, but systemic racism isn't always obvious, which is what makes it so hard to see. Before I understood that, I used to get frustrated and angry, even at myself. But as I grew up, I noticed that I wasn't the only one experiencing this. Other people of color were experiencing the same things. I started to notice a pattern. I learned that if you're Black, you're more likely to be stopped by the police. It can be harder to get a job if you're Black. It can even be more difficult to buy a home. If you're Black, you're less likely to go to a good school or to be in charge. And most heroes in stories do not look like you. As you read these things, you might start feeling sad or even angry. You might also start to wonder how it got this way. Well, the reason is kind of long and complicated, but I'll do my best to explain. Since the start of our country meaning the United States of America, many people with white skin whose families came from Europe were given land, opportunity, and access to money, while people of color, which means those with Black or brown skin and the indigenous people that lived on the land before white people arrived, They were attacked, killed, and sold into slavery. Lies were told about people of color to scare white people and to make white people believe that people of color would hurt them or steal their property or give them diseases. Yes, that really happened. And sadly, many people believed those lies. Then, even after they fought for their freedom, people of color still didn't have many rights. They still had more obstacles and experienced a lot of discrimination. New laws were even created to make life harder for people of color because white people did not want to share. Over time, the value of land and money increased, which gave white people more and more for their kids and grandkids. Today, the unequal balance of who has land, money, power, and rights still exists and affects people of color. It affects people of color's ability to live in nice homes and neighborhoods. It affects our ability to start businesses and donate our money to good causes. It affects the amount of money that is put into building schools and hiring great teachers. It affects people of color's ability to speak their own languages and preserve their own cultures. It also affects people of color's ability to tell their own stories or make their own TV shows. It affects who has access to medicine and good doctors, and it affects how people of color are treated by the police, the government, and the court system. All of these things are the result of systemic racism. And even though people of color have more equality today than they ever have, new forms of systemic racism are created all the time. We need to change the system and erase the racist ideas that live in our laws, our schools, our stories, and other institutions. We need to create a way for people of color who have been left behind for so long to catch up so that money, land, great schools, doctors, and basic rights are equally available to everyone, not just white people or not just people with a lot of power. Systemic racism isn't new. It's just hard to see. But once you do see it, it's also hard to ignore. So practice seeing systemic racism every day and try to do something about it. In the schools you go to and in the movies you watch, in the neighborhoods you live in, point it out to your friends. Point it out to your family. Because systemic racism can't be undone until we open our eyes and see it. This is the outro page. I hope you and a grown-up take a moment to look at it. On the other side of this page, there's a place where you can find more Kids About books. You can go to akidsbookabout.com to read more Kids Book About. The end. Be sure to share what you read. Tell somebody, post a photo, give this book away, or share this video to share what you care about and help stop systemic racism.